Okay, this is a brief introduction to reading sonnets. What are sonnets? And with a specific emphasis on Shakespeare's sonnets. My seniors, years ago, I switched from doing research papers on larger texts to just looking at sonnets and then having students pick one sonnet to spend a few weeks with. And it's been really great. Start with this Oscar Wilde quote that I love. Life has been your art. You have set yourself to music. Your days are your sonnets. So I like to start with the best meeting of lovers, or at least the most famous meeting of lovers in English literature, the meeting of Romeo and Juliet. As you might know, Romeo, early in the play, goes to a party at Juliet's house. Romeo's family and Juliet's family have fought in the streets, have killed each other, and are always on sort of eggshells around each other. Romeo takes the risk because at Juliet's house, his love is going to be there, Rosalind. And he goes to the party expecting to see this girl who doesn't give him the time of day, and he sees Juliet, who he's never seen. And his first words when he sees Juliet are, "She doth teach the torches to burn bright." They meet, and it's important to know that in this time, men and women are not supposed to touch, particularly unmarried men, unmarried women, boys, girls, not supposed to touch. Even when you're dancing, you're supposed to dance like this far apart. Romeo grabs her hand, as Leonardo DiCaprio does here. Romeo grabs her hand, immediately a bold move. Romeo says to her, "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." Romeo makes Juliet a shrine, like a statue of a saint that pilgrims go to pray to. This is a cliche. This is Romeo using cliche love language. You literally put your beloved on a high pedestal. And he says, just touching your hand with my unworthy hand, touching you this way might profane you, might make you sort of dirtier, and it might sully your hand. So this is like cliche language. Juliet, good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. So saints, when they go to statues, might touch the statue that they're praying to. So saints have hands. The statues have hands that the pilgrims' hands touch when they go to pray to them. And the only kiss that pilgrims show, palmer and pilgrim are the same thing. The only kiss that palmers show, that palmers or pilgrims show, is the kiss of their hands, the statue's hand being here and the pilgrim's hand being here. This is a really intellectual way of saying, no, I'm not kissing you. Romeo, have not saints lips and holy palmers too? Juliet corrects him. I pilgrim lips that they must use in prayer. Pilgrims that go to the statues of saints to pray are praying. That's the point of their lips, not kissing. Romeo, not easily denied. Well then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray. Grant thou lest faith turn to despair. These are two bright kids, right? They're taking this metaphor of Juliet as the statue of a saint and Romeo as a pilgrim, and they're just exploring it imaginatively. Juliet, saints do not move, right? If you're a statue, you don't move. Though grant for prayer's sake. So saints grant prayers requests, but they don't move. And Romeo says, well then don't move. Move not. While my prayer's effect I take. His prayer is to kiss her, and he's going to just take that opportunity. They end up continuing the song. They end up continuing another poem until they're interrupted by the nurse. Here's what they say to each other. What they say to each other in their first conversation is, in fact, a sonnet. It makes a 14-line iambic pentameter poem. We'll go over that. If I profane with my unworthiest hand the holy shrine, the gentle sin is this. My lips, two blushing pilgrims, ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Have not saints lips, and holy palmers too? Ay, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer. Well then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray. Grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. Saints, do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take. It's a beautiful sonnet. I said to some students a while back, if you ever meet someone and you actually speak a sonnet together right out of the gate, you might want to get that person's number. And the students wisely reminded me, yeah, but the end of Romeo and Juliet's not good. So here's what I'd like to address today. First, where do sonnets come from? It's pretty interesting. Two, what is a sonnet? And there's actually multiple definitions. I'm going to focus on a Shakespearean sonnet. Third, what are Shakespeare's sonnets about? Four, why did Shakespeare write them? And five, how can I best experience them? First, sonnets come from Italy. Sonnet, the word, means little song. And sonnets initially were written by the poet Petrarch to his beloved Laura, who he never in real life attained. They never consummated their love. And but these are the earliest examples, the earliest, most well-known examples of sonnets. And here's what one sounds like, obviously translated into English. Those eyes, 'neath which my passionate rapture rose, the arms, hands, feet, the beauty that erewhile could my own soul from its own self beguile, and in a separate world of dreams enclose, the hair's bright tresses full of golden glows, and the soft lightning of the angelic smile that changed this earth to some celestial isle. Okay, so the poem goes on. What you get in Petrarch, and they're beautiful and worth knowing and worth reading, but what you get is the beginning of the cliche of taking your beloved and putting that beloved on a high pedestal. And you do that by comparing all their body parts to, lips are like roses. Here, the hair's bright tresses, the lightning of an angelic smile. Your cheeks are like such and such, and your, toenails are like something else. So Petrarch basically invents and concretizes these romantic cliches that become part of our language. You can still listen to love songs that do this. What's interesting is that Shakespeare doesn't do this, and we'll get to that. Second, what is a sonnet? Oh, anyway, so just one important thing. If you're going to know anything about Petrarch sonnets, what I would suggest knowing is they were all about the unattainability of the beloved, that the speaker never got to actually love and be with the beloved. It was all about, the pedestal was so high they were unattainable. That's important. So what is a sonnet? It's a few things. In Shakespeare's hands, it's a 14-line romantic lyric poem. It's 14 lines long, poem in a box. The music of it is iambic pentameter, and this is where it's easy to lose students, but think of it as music. Some rock songs start like this, right? But invariably, the drummer will vary the rhythm. He'll syncopate the rhythm. So what happens is, right? And poets do that. And it's a way for poets to make you land on different words strategically to pay attention. I wouldn't really overly worry about this. It's just part of what Shakespeare does magically in these poems is he creates rhythms that can sort of hypnotize you, but also more importantly, make you pay attention to what he wants you to pay attention to, which is what art does. An iambic pentameter line that you might have said today, if you're a New Englander, is I went to dunks and then I went to class. So I am is da-dum, right? Unstressed, stressed. And if you get 5 of them, it's iambic pentameter. That's just the kind of line that's in a Shakespearean sonnet. I went to dunks and then I went to class. Sonnets almost always have a volta, which is the Italian word for turn. So you might have like 4 lines. You might have 8 lines and then 6, or you might have 4 line couplet. But at some point, usually in the middle, there's a question is answered, a problem is addressed, and the sonnet sort of changes gears. And you have a closing couplet, rhyme couplet at the end. That's how sonnets are built. But you can know all that and absolutely not know how to make your own sonnet. So Shakespeare is just a wizard at manipulating this pattern. Again, more iambic pentameter examples. Our lunch was gross, but it was cheap and fast. The beginning of the 73rd sonnet, one of his best. That time of year thou mayest in me behold. John Keats, my favorite romantic poet, died young, knew he was going to die. His death was always somewhat inevitable, and his tombstone says, "Here lies one whose name is writ in water." Iambic pentameter. In Sonnet 73, just to give you a heads up, just if you were to study the music of this poem, it's really beautiful. Because the first line, that time of year thou mayest in me behold, and the last line, to love that well which thou must leave ere long, don't worry if you know what it means or not. Perfect iambic pentameter lines. And the 12 lines in between are all sort of like jazz-like syncopations and variations. There's no perfect iambic pentameter line. Just pick a line. Pick the second line. When yellow leaves, or none nor few do hang, right? So immediately there's a shift. This is just one of the many things you can pay attention to. You can ignore it or pay attention to it. So what are the sonnets about? If you say they're about love, that's not wrong. It's just incomplete. So there's just infinite debate about Shakespeare's sonnets. What we think we know is that there's 154 of them. And the first 17 are sonnets about the hopes for a young man. There's this beautiful young man who's single, and the speaker of the sonnets is begging the young man to get married and to procreate so that his beauty won't die off. And there's a lot of these poems that are literally the same topic, the same theme, the same idea, and Shakespeare just uses different metaphors, different imagery, and it's kind of a workshop in variation, actually. Sonnets 18 to 126, the speaker celebrates his love for the young man. I don't have a lot of interest in speculating about Shakespeare's sexuality. If he were gay, bisexual, or heterosexual, that wouldn't affect me whatsoever. Shakespeare's biography isn't super, it's interesting to me, but it's not as interesting to me as his literature is. I don't know. We don't have any journal entries, nothing personal, and Shakespeare in his plays utterly disappears. No one knows what he really thinks about anything. Maybe in the sonnets we get a little window, but it's really, really difficult. There's a chance that he was told to write these poems by a patron, someone paying him. I don't know. But here the speaker celebrates his love for the young man in infinitely varied ways. And here are some things he does. So in 18 to 126, we have the young man, the audience, the beautiful young man, mistreats the speaker. So in 36, so shall those blots that do with me remain without thy help be by me be borne alone. We get the young man's theft of the poet's mistress. So the young guy is writing poetry to steals his girl. Thou dost love her because thou knowest I love her. That's pretty blunt. Third, this section of the sonnets also deals with the appearance of rival poets who attempt to win the young man's favor. Sonnet 84. But he that writes of you, if he can tell that you are you, so dignifies his story. A lot of paranoia about other people. 4, the speaker's separation from the young man through travel, or, more interestingly, the young man being indifferent to the poet. How far I toil, still farther off from thee. No more be grieved at that which thou hast done. 'Tis better to be vile than vile esteemed. And then we get the blunt infidelity. The speaker is unfaithful to the young man. Those pretty wrongs that liberty commits when I am sometimes absent from thy heart, thy beauty, and thy years, full well befits, for still temptation follows where thou art. Okay. Line 127 to 154 shift, and they're called the Dark Lady Sonnets. And there's, again, infinite speculation. And I am not claiming to be a Shakespeare scholar. I am a lowly high school teacher, but I have read a lot on this, and there's various speculation. Dark Lady could mean an actual black lady. There was a well-known woman. She was an African immigrant who went by the name Lucy Morgan, and she ran one of the most well-known brothels near the Globe Theater. So, are these poems sort of introducing the idea of a morally promiscuous whore, or are the dark lady sonnets simply introducing a brunette, someone with dark hair? There's debate on this. So, some themes that we get sort of over and over again. What the sonnets are about on the level of ideas, not super interesting. I would put out there that there's a handful of ideas that live in the 154 sonnets. What to me is virtuosic and artful and amazing about the sonnets is the infinite variation. Imagine, being told, write the thought, thank you for your text, 154 ways. That's what Shakespeare was trained to do as a young man in school. He was trained to vary his language in Latin at the time, and he's great with that in the sonnets. So here are some themes. First, time. Maybe the most important word in all of Shakespeare is the idea of time. And here we get time especially linked to procreation, in that one way we live forever is to procreate. Another way the poem suggests we live forever is by writing poetry that lives forever. Second, romantic reputation, in that it's very complicated. Like, unlike in Petrarch, which feels more like caricatures, cliches, here there's a lot of complexity to the characters that are mentioned. Third, and again, more on complexity. It's almost like Shakespeare took the spirit of his plays, which one of the parts of Shakespeare's plays, one of the components of them is in his best plays, he seems to always resist simple characterizations. Like, Hamlet's not a villain. Hamlet's not perfectly noble. Like, it's incredibly complicated, right? And it seems like that idea lives in the sonnets in an interesting way. So the sonnets resist simple answers to life's biggest questions, like, what do we do with the fact that our beauty goes away when we age? What do we do when someone doesn't love us back? Like, these big questions. And the sonnets deal with them with great honesty and complexity. Why did Shakespeare write his sonnets is kind of an interesting biological point. First, he didn't need to. They were published, some of them were published without his permission. And then his sonnets were published, as I'll show you, late in his career when he was incredibly wealthy, we know, from lots of real estate documents, plus the properties he owned. This is the Globe Theater. He didn't need to publish them. And there's some discussion as to how seriously he was about publishing them. 1609 was an odd time for sonnets. Yes, I'm sure that I don't know the most about Shakespeare's sonnets. I am sure also that I'm the only teacher who will put an in-sync slide in a sonnets presentation, because 1609, publishing sonnets sonnets were in vogue in the 1580s and 90s. Astrophil and Stella, stuff like that. Publishing sonnets in 1609 would be like In Sync coming out in 2022. Like, this is a 90s band, not a 21st century band. So, interesting, odd time for sonnets. Some people argue that they're almost a sketchbook for the plays. So if Shakespeare's like, it's almost like calisthenics for writing great dramatic monologues and soliloquies. If you think of Juliet's great solo moments, or Cleopatra's, or Macbeth's, or Iago's, or Hamlet's, or name your favorite Shakespeare character who has a great interior life. There's a chance that the sonnets are a way to practice for those. And whether he intended that or not, they seem to maybe serve that purpose. There's also that notion, and this is obviously sensitive to COVID times, but that the sonnets was a way that he kept his skills sharp during times of plague, where the theater and the actors, theater folks couldn't meet, and they couldn't perform plays for people. So maybe it was a way to keep skills sharp during times of plague. Here are some 5 suggestions. I have a separate poetry video that I just created, that's called Not All Water is Baptism, that you might want to check out. That's a more deliberate walking through of just how to read poems in general. But these are tips on just reading Shakespeare's sonnets. First of all, you do not need biceps like this guy's to read sonnets. I would never have read a poem in my life if I needed biceps like that. They have to be read out loud, slowly and thoughtfully. If you're in a rush, don't read this. Two, please don't worry about knowing what everything means. It's 400 years old, right? The ones you're interested in, go back, look things up, reread, ask, go online, poke around, ask your teacher, poke around. Do not worry about knowing what everything means. And if you're a teacher, please don't give tests and quizzes on sonnets. Third, please pay close attention to your impressions and feelings. Shakespeare is working on us. Pay attention to our emotional responses to this, our personal reactions. Do any of these moments in the poems have any personal resonance? Do we feel any of this, right? These poems are not written for people to write thesis papers about. These came out of a person's guts, right? We have to honor that. So if our guts and our heart and our mind that have a reaction to them, write that down, talk about it. Fourth, read them, 154 of them, it's not much reading, but mark along the way the ones you want to revisit and reread them again and reread them again. Go on YouTube and find other people reading them. Patrick Stewart read all of the sonnets and put them on YouTube during quarantine, and there's a gazillion other places to go too. 5, and this is where we start getting into like writing and thinking and mean things that us English teachers make you do, but it comes down to this. Think about how you felt and reacted, and then ask the next question: what did the poet do to make you feel that? What did the poet do to bother you or to worry you or connect to you or teach you? Was it the sounds? Was it the imagery, word choice? What was it? That to me is the big question that allows you to go from simply just emoting to emoting and thinking at the same time. And to me, that's the greatest way to honor art, is simply to look, pay really close attention to it. So the language is really old. The feelings, I would argue, are not old. And I think I like to read old text with my students because I don't like the idea of them being limited to what they can access. And I think, if any of us, you watching this, ever craft something and publish it and it comes out of your guts and your heart, isn't it terrible to think that a little while from now people just wouldn't want to do the work to understand it, So this is Journey, the 1970s band, their song Don't Stop Believing, as a sonnet. A lonely maiden from a hamlet small, a boy within a woeful city reared. They both at midnight left their port of call, toward any destination volunteered. A public house is where their journey ends, where patrons smoke their pipes and minstrels play. They share the evening swiftly more than friends. The others smile, inviting each to stay. Yet there are others wandering through the street beneath the lamplight, searching for a soul. They comb the darkened night and hope to meet the sweet companion that shall make them whole. Ensure thy heart won't let their spirit leave. 'Tis most important thou still believe. I hope this video helps you. Please put comments. What was helpful? What would you like to hear more about? What do you think? What are your experiences? What are your favorite sonnets? Good luck with your reading, and keep in touch.